After I refused to give my mom my inheritance, she invited me to a family meeting. When I arrived, they had lawyers ready to force me to sign it over. But the moment they handed me the papers, I smiled and said, "Funny, I brought someone too." The door opened and I never expected to be here, sitting across from my own mother and the rest of my so-called family, watching them try to steal what was rightfully mine. But here I was. Let me take you back a bit. My dad was the only real parent I had growing up. He wasn't perfect, but he worked hard, took care of me, and most of all, he was fair. My mom, on the other hand, she was selfish, manipulative, and always played the victim. They divorced when I was a kid, and honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened to him. When Dad passed away last year, it was sudden. Heart attack. No warning. One day, we were talking about finally going on that fishing trip to Canada, and the next, I was picking out his casket. It wrecked me. But what came after? That was almost worse. His will was clear. Everything was left to me. The house, the savings, the investments, everything. He had made sure of it because he knew what my mom was like. He even told me once, "She'll come after it, son. Be ready." I thought I was, but I underestimated just how low she would go. Not even a week after the funeral, she started calling. At first, it was the fake concern. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" Then, it turned into guilt tripping. "You know, if it weren't for me, you wouldn't have had the life your father gave you." And finally, straight up demands. "You need to do the right thing and split it with your family." By family, she meant herself, her husband, who she married 2 years after leaving Dad, and their 2 golden children, my half-siblings. People who barely spoke to my dad. People who never lifted a finger to help him, even when he was in the hospital. I told her no. Over and over. That's when things got ugly. She started showing up at my house, unannounced, banging on the door. When I stopped answering, she had my half-sister leave long, dramatic voicemails about how I was tearing this family apart. Then came the threats. She claimed she would contest the will, that she would drag this through the courts for years. I held my ground. Then, out of nowhere, I got an invitation to a family meeting. That should have been my first red flag. My family never met for anything unless it was to cause drama. But something about it felt different. The wording was off. Too formal. I almost didn't go. But then, something in my gut told me I needed to see what they were up to. When I walked into my mom's house that day, I knew immediately that I had walked into an ambush. The living room was set up like some kind of courtroom. My mom sat in the center, next to her husband, smug as ever. My half-siblings were there too, looking way too pleased with themselves. And then, there were the 2 men in suits. Lawyers. I didn't even get a hello. One of the lawyers stood up and said, "We're here to discuss the proper distribution of your father's assets." I almost laughed. Proper distribution? He handed me a thick stack of papers. This is a revised agreement. It outlines a fair division of the inheritance among all immediate family members. I flipped through it. They wanted me to sign over 75% of everything. The house, the savings, even my dad's car. I looked up at my mom. "You have got to be kidding me." She sighed dramatically, like I was some disobedient child. "This is the best solution for everyone. You don't need all of it. Be reasonable." Reasonable? They wanted to take everything my father worked for. Everything he left for me. And they thought I would just roll over and let them? I took a deep breath and smiled. "Funny," I said, tossing the papers onto the coffee table. "I brought someone too." The door swung open. And in walked my lawyer. But not just any lawyer. My father's lawyer. The one who drafted his will. The one who knew every single legal safeguard my dad put in place to prevent exactly this from happening. My mom's face went pale. Her husband shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My lawyer didn't waste any time. He picked up their so-called agreement and flipped through it. Then, without looking up, he said, "This is cute. Illegal, but cute." One of the other lawyers cleared his throat. "We believe that given the circumstances, a redistribution." My lawyer cut him off. "Let me stop you right there. The will is ironclad. Any attempt to contest it will be laughed out of court. And if you so much as try to coerce my client into signing away his inheritance, we will press charges for fraud and attempted extortion." Dead silence. Then, my mom's voice, sharp and desperate. "You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't take your own mother to court." I looked her dead in the eye. "Try me." The room was silent. No one dared to move. My mom, who always had something to say, just stared at me like she didn't recognize the person in front of her. My half-sister, usually full of fake sympathy, suddenly looked like she wanted to sink into the couch. My stepdad? He was gripping the armrest so hard his knuckles had gone white. Then, the lawyer sitting next to my mom cleared his throat. "There's no need for hostility. We're just trying to come to a mutual agreement." Mutual agreement, my ass. I folded my arms and leaned back in my chair. A mutual agreement would have been talking to me before you had a lawyer draft up a document that steals what's mine. My lawyer flipped the contract shut and dropped it onto the table. This document wouldn't hold up in court for 2 seconds. And if you think my client is signing anything today, you're out of your minds. My mom exhaled sharply. This is ridiculous. I turned to her. No, what's ridiculous is you trying to manipulate me into handing over everything my dad left me. Her voice turned sharp. He didn't leave it to you because he loved you more. He just didn't think things through. You don't need all of it. Your siblings deserve their fair share. I clenched my jaw. My siblings? You mean the 2 people who barely even acknowledged Dad existed? The ones who never visited him in the hospital, never called him on his birthday, never lifted a finger when he was sick? They don't deserve a damn thing. My half-brother, who had been sitting quietly in the corner this whole time, suddenly snapped. That's not fair. We weren't close to him because he never tried with us. He always favored you. I turned to face him. You mean the man you called a washed-up loser the last time he asked you to come over for Christmas? That man. He turned red but said nothing. Then, my stepdad, who had been silent up until now, leaned forward. Listen, son, I cut him off. Don't call me that. His face darkened, but he forced a fake smile. All right. Look, we can all sit here and argue, or we can find a way to make this work for everyone. My lawyer smirked. Oh, we have found a way to make this work. It's called following the will. Then, my lawyer reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. He slid it across the table toward my mom's lawyer. That contains a full legal breakdown of the will, copies of my client's rights, and a cease and desist order. If you or your clients continue harassing my client for money, we will pursue legal action. My mom's lawyer flipped through the pages, his face growing more serious by the second. That's when my mom snapped. She stood up so fast her chair nearly tipped over. You would do this to your own family? I looked up at her. You stopped being my family the moment you tried to steal from me. Her hands curled into fists. You think you're so much better than us, don't you? I just stared at her. And then, she did something that made my blood run cold. She smiled. Not a normal smile. A calculated one. She sat back down, smoothed out her blouse, and sighed. All right. Fine. She gestured at her lawyer. We won't fight it. That was too easy. Way too easy. My lawyer must have sensed it too because he narrowed his eyes. Good. Then we'll be taking our leave. We gathered our things and walked to the door. But just as I stepped out, my mom called after me. Take care of that house, sweetheart. I paused, turned back. Her smile was still there. You never know when accidents can happen. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't say anything. Just walked out. But as I drove home, her words echoed in my head. Something wasn't right. And I was about to find out just how far my mother was willing to go. I barely slept that night. My mom's words kept replaying in my head. Take care of that house, sweetheart. You never know when accidents can happen. It wasn't just a comment. It was a threat. I tried to shake it off. Maybe she was just being dramatic, trying to scare me into second-guessing my decision. But something in her eyes told me otherwise. The next morning, I went to check on the house. I hadn't moved in yet, too many memories, but I planned to eventually. It was still my dad's place, and the thought of someone else living there felt wrong. I pulled into the driveway and immediately felt my stomach drop. The front door was wide open. I knew for a fact I had locked it. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. The house had been trashed. Couch cushions slashed open. Drawers pulled out and dumped onto the floor. My dad's framed photos shattered. And in the middle of the living room, written in red spray paint across the wall, was one word: thief. I clenched my fists. I didn't even have to guess who was behind this. I pulled out my phone and called the cops. While waiting, I checked the rest of the house. The damage was bad, but nothing seemed stolen. This wasn't a robbery. It was a message. When the police arrived, I told them everything. The threats. The inheritance battle. The so-called family meeting. The officers took notes, asked a few questions, but I could tell they weren't going to do much. Without security footage or witnesses, it's hard to prove who did this, one of them said. I almost laughed. Like I didn't know exactly who was responsible. I filed the report anyway. If nothing else, I wanted it on record. Then, I did something I knew my mom and her little army of thieves wouldn't expect. I installed cameras. And not just a couple of cheap ones, I went all in. High definition, night vision, motion-activated cameras covering every possible entrance. The front door, the back door, the garage, even the hallway inside. Then, I waited. Sure enough, they couldn't help themselves. For nights later, at 2:37 a.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. Motion detected. Backyard. I bolted upright in bed, grabbed my phone, and opened the live feed. And there she was. My mother. Dressed in all black, creeping around my dad's house with a flashlight. But she wasn't alone. Her husband was with her, carrying what looked like a canister of gasoline. I felt my blood turn to ice. I hit record on the camera feed and called 911. 911? What's your emergency? My mother and her husband are trying to burn down my house. The dispatcher asked for details, but I barely heard her. I was too busy watching in shock as my own mother handed her husband a lighter. Then, the sirens started. They must have heard them too because suddenly they panicked. My mom yanked the canister from his hands and they both took off running toward the street. But it was too late. The cops got there before they could escape. I watched through the camera as my mom screamed at the officers, trying to spin some story about how they were just checking on the property. But the gasoline in her hand said otherwise. And when the officers checked the canister, confirming it was full of fuel, that was it. They were arrested on the spot. I drove straight there, arriving just as they were being shoved into the back of the squad car. My mom saw me and started screaming. "You set me up. You did this to me." I stared at her, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. "No, Mom," I said, my voice calm. "You did this to yourself." She lunged forward, but the cops held her back. That was the last time I saw her face to face. But the story wasn't over. Because what happened next? That was the real twist. The cops took my mother and her husband to jail that night. I stood there in the cold, watching as the flashing red and blue lights reflected off the pavement. My hands were still shaking, not from fear, but from anger. They had planned to burn my house down. My dad's house. And for what? Spite? Revenge? Or just plain greed? Whatever the reason, I was done. Done giving them chances. Done hoping they'd do the right thing. Done letting them walk all over me like I was still some dumb kid. This time, they were going to face real consequences. The fallout the next few days were a blur of police reports, lawyer meetings, and court documents. My mother was charged with attempted arson and conspiracy to commit a felony. Her husband got hit with the same. And because my security cameras had caught everything in high definition, their lawyers didn't have much to work with. The best part? Since she was already on thin ice with debt collectors and had a history of financial trouble, the judge denied her bail. She had to sit in jail until her trial. My half-siblings, the two entitled brats who thought they deserved a cut of my inheritance, tried to distance themselves. My half-sister left me a long, tearful voicemail about how she had no idea Mom was going to do something so crazy and that she hoped we could still be family. I didn't respond. My half-brother, the one who called my dad a washed-up loser, sent a short text. "Hey man, I didn't know about this. Hope you are okay." I left him on read. They might not have been part of the arson attempt, but they sure as hell knew what my mom was capable of. They were more than happy to help pressure me into giving up my inheritance, but the second things got real, they ran. Not my problem. The trial, it took about 6 months for the case to go to court. My mother tried everything to get out of it. She claimed she had no idea there was gasoline in the canister. That she was just checking on the house because she was worried about me. Then she switched tactics. Claimed I set her up, that I had lured her there and planted evidence to make it look like arson. That theory fell apart when the prosecutor played the security footage for the jury. There she was, plain as day, holding a flashlight, pointing where her husband should pour the gasoline. There he was, pulling a lighter from his pocket. The jury took less than 2 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her husband got 12, since he was the one actually holding the lighter. They both tried to appeal. They lost. Justice served with them gone. I finally had peace. No more threats. No more late-night calls. No more stress. I kept the house. Fixed up the damage. Replaced the broken photos of my dad. I even framed a copy of the cease and desist order my lawyer sent them, just as a reminder of how far they went and how much they lost. As for my half-siblings, I never spoke to them again. Last I heard, my half-sister was drowning in credit card debt, and my half-brother was bouncing between jobs, still blaming everyone else for his problems. Not my concern. They made their choices. Just like my mother did. And in the end, they all got exactly what they deserved.